All right, welcome to this week's episode of Life Imitating Movies. I am Brad. That is Mitch. There you go. So it's a little podcast we started doing earlier in the pandemic where we get together every week and talk about like news stories of the week and relate them back to movies that have been made in the past. So how you doing this week, Mitch?
Doing okay, all things considered. We're getting there. The weather's starting to turn, so it's looking pretty good on the horizon.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and with the weather turning, I like to roll down the windows and crank up the music. That was a good transition into my opening question. But no, this week's opener was music and film for me is super important. It usually can make or break a movie depending on the film or whatever, depending on the music. A lot of times it's the score. But this question was there a song, a popular culture song, a song that had already been produced that was put in a movie that for you was like, oh, that like enhanced the scene. That like now when you hear that song on the radio, whatever, your mind just automatically goes back to that moment in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to do a little bit of research on this one to kind of find a good answer, and I think I did. I feel like with this question, I left something out. I'm forgetting about one that's a better example for me personally that I just couldn't think of or find, but I like my answer. So, you posed a question. Let's hear yours first.
Okay, so for me, it was House on Haunted Hill, and the song was Sweet Dreams by Marilyn Manson. If
Okay.
you remember, like they cut when everybody's heading up to the house, they cut to Sweet Dreams starting to play. And that's, for me, it's like the most perfect use of already out there, a pop culture song, if you would call it. And it was just like every time I hear that song now, it's like one of my all time favorite songs. And so every time I hear that song now, that's like the scene I always think about is the scene in House on Haunted Hill where it's dark and all the cars are just driving up to the house. It's such a perfect use of that song.
This is an interesting question you pose because I know that song, but when I think of that song and a movie associated with it, what I think of is the trailer for Wrath of the Titans back from whatever year it was in the 2010s, whenever it came out. But they used that song in the trailer. And I'd known the song before, but when I saw that and they had the song in the trailer and it matched up well with the footage, it intrigued me about the movie. I thought, oh, okay, this looks interesting. It's got some good visuals, and I read the reviews and it wasn't that good, so I didn't end up seeing it. But it just, it's funny how you have different associations with the same song and movies, but we think of different things when we hear the same song.
Oh yeah, it's just for me, it's like Marilyn Manson. That was like the song that put him on the map. And I've seen him in concert a few times, and the guy puts on a great concert. But yeah, it's just like it's a horror movie, and the song is like really horror-ish. It's for me, it's like yeah, my all-time favorite use of a pop culture song. So let's hear yours, man. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of good answers for this one. You could pick out a couple good examples, but for me, when I did a little bit of research, I kind of looked at some of the movies. The clearest example of when I hear a song now, and I definitely associate it with a movie scene, it's "Freebird" by Leonard Skinner and the church scene from Kingsman: The Secret Service, and that is it's such a phenomenal scene. And if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Where there's a scene where an agent, to not to give away the whole movie, but there's a secret agent and he is stuck in this church full of kind of people, and everyone starts going crazy and attacking each other. And a lot of it is done in pretty continuous takes, not one long take, but in pretty continuous takes. And it's just a great piece of action, and the way that it's shot and edited, and it's a great scene. And it just now whenever I hear that song, it always makes me think of that scene.
It's interesting because that's another one. Freebird for me is makes me think of the ending of The Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie.
I
Because
again, same song, different things. I thought you were going to say the scene from Forrest Gump that Freebird is in as well. because there's a scene in Forrest Gump where that song is featured as well. So it just, again, same song, people associate it with different things in different movies.
Oh yeah, well, it's a great song. I mean, one of the great guitar riffs of all time, really.
Oh yeah, it's a great song, and like I said, now it always makes me think of that scene from that movie, though.
All right, so our first story this week is it is movie related. It's Ronald DeFeo, if you know that name. He's the guy who killed his parents and I think it was three siblings in 1969. And if you know the Amityville Horror, he is the guy who said that voices told him in the house to kill his family. And obviously that spawned the book, which spawned the movie, which spawned the remake, which spawned, I think there's like 50 different movies, Amityville movies out now. So it was interesting because he died literally 2 days after I watched like a documentary on the Amityville Horror. So it was weird timing that happened. And so, yeah, how would you think about all that? And do you think he heard voices?
Believe whatever you want to believe about the real life story behind this, is what I say. The guy could just be crazy. I don't think there are a lot of things out there that maybe we don't understand as humans, that maybe there are such things as ghosts or spirits or supernatural stuff. Who knows? These are answers we don't have. So, believe whatever you want to believe about the guy in real life. But you're right, this has spawned a lot of different iterations and representations of this story. So, let's just get into the picks because there's a lot to choose from. But I have a feeling maybe we might have picked the same one on this.
I'd say it's a good bet because honestly, I think I only saw the original Amityville Horror once a super long time ago. So I went with the 2004 Ryan Reynolds Amityville Horror, the remake. Yeah, and there you go. I mean, I think it was only natural that's the one you're going to pick. I remember, I haven't seen it in a while, which means it's not like one of my favorites. I don't remember absolutely hating it. I don't remember absolutely loving it. I remember just being a decent, if not memorable, ghost movie.
Yeah, I'm a little more tepid on it because I saw it a few years back for the first time, and I didn't think it was anything special. I agree with some of the reviews that were written about it at the time, where it just kind of busted out all these different horror cliches and tropes and didn't really do anything different or unique. I feel like, because I feel like there's a lot of material to work with based off of the real life story. But, I agree with that, where it was just a pretty straightforward, typical horror movie. And, that sounds like it may not be that bad, that it's just kind of average. But given the source material that it had to work with, and Ryan Reynolds starring it, and he did a pretty good job in the role, but I feel like there wasn't enough material for him to work with, not enough for him to do to really kind of get into the role. So for me, it was very, very average.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. And it's every Amityville story told has been about kind of about the Lutz family. The Lutz family is the true life family that moved in after the DeFeo family, and then they ended up moving out of the house 29 days later or something like that because they also heard the voices. I should have looked this up, but this is how prepared I am. But I don't know if they ever actually did a movie, like a true story movie about dealing with the actual DeFeo murders. Maybe they have, and I just haven't seen it. But that might be an interesting movie to really delve into that true life story.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like there's a lot to work with given the real life material, and it's a shame because in The Conjuring 2, it kind of opens with Ed and Lorraine Warren, the main characters in the Conjuring franchise, dealing with the Amityville situation, and they kind of blow through it in a short amount of time, and I wish they almost would have dedicated an entire movie to that because they could have made a fun supernatural horror movie, because The Conjuring is a pretty good quality franchise horror movie, saga. So I think they definitely could have done some interesting stuff and put a good supernatural, creepy twist on that story. But they just kind of glossed over at the beginning of the second Conjuring. And don't get me wrong, that movie is still good. I just wish they would have taken an approach to that where they would have made a good horror movie out of the source material.
Yeah. So I'll end with this question, which is, let's say the house goes on the market, that Amityville house. You're up in New York. You got an extra $100,000 or eight. Let's say it's $50,000. It's not expensive. They're trying to unload it. Do you buy the house with its history?
No. Even if you're not a big,
No?
even if you're not a big ghost person, the fact that murders and some bad stuff took place there, I personally wouldn't want to live in that house.
Nah. Yeah. I guess to live there, maybe. I don't know, man. 50 grand. I may have to buy it and turn it into a tourist attraction.
So, for those of you who may not know, March 14th, Pi Day 3.14, it's kind of named after that. It's its own little holiday, and people celebrate pi and eat pie and mathematic equations. And it's just a fun little day every year that people do some fun and creative stuff with. So, we decided to pick out a story from this past week where, of course, pizzerias across the country were having little deals on pizza pies on Pi Day, not only to boost some sales for them and get some customers in there, but because again, a lot of them are probably struggling due to the pandemic. So, I picked out a story, and I'm sure you love this, about a San Francisco pizza joint and the fun things they do on Pi Day. So, if you can kind of track down this article, it is kind of worth a read. It's a fun little personal story about the people who own this pizzeria in San Francisco, and it's called Pi. And this was, before this previous Pi Day. This has been open a little bit, but, how they've adjusted to the pandemic, about how they did deals on Pi Day. So, I'm sure love reading about this. It's a pizzeria in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, man. I was born just south of San Francisco in Fremont. So I am even though I'm wearing a Dodgers hat, I lived in LA for a while, so I'm a Dodgers guy too. But I am a San Francisco boy at heart, and pizza, any article about pizza is cool for me. And I'll be honest, I never actually thought about eating pizza on Pi Day. I like this article because a new tradition for me is now born. I don't really need an excuse to eat pizza, but if I'm just like, oh, today's Pi Day, I need to have pizza. Works with me. And I like the article because I like the fact that in the article they said that they open every day before the pandemic because they had to change things, but they open every day at 3:14 p.m., which I thought was interesting. Like they go hard, man, 3:14 every day. And it was a good one of those feel good stories, man.
Yeah, I will be honest. I did partake in a Pi Day deal with a local pizzeria that I like going to. So they had a deal where you get one large pizza and you get a second one for $3.14. And I thought, well, that's just too good of a deal to pass up. So I did end up getting some pizza on Pi Day. And when I say large, this place, near where I live, they make a large, pizza. So I had a lot of extra pizza, kind of shared it with whoever I could. So, but I have a feeling that maybe we may have picked back to back again the same movie relating to this story, because when you think San Francisco and when you think pizza, those two things together in the same sentence, there's a clear movie that I thought of relating to this story, and I'll see if it matches yours. But the movie is Inside Out from Disney Pixar.
No, we did not pick the same movie. I'm sorry, sir.
Because there's a line where one of the emotions, anger, in the movie goes, "Thanks, San Francisco, you've ruined pizza." Because they put broccoli on the pizza in the movie in San Francisco. So clearly that made me think of that. That was the first thing I thought of. So Inside Out, I think this is one of Pixar's better efforts in recent years. This one was a lot more emotional, and not just because it was about emotions, but this had story to it, and it had human emotions, and it had these tear-jerking moments. So Inside Out was, I think, one of Pixar's best efforts around the time than they've had before.
Oh yeah, man, Inside Out is phenomenal, dude. I think everybody in the world, Bing Bong, everybody cries at Bing Bong. Bing Bong is like one of the saddest scenes in the history, with the exception of like the opening 10 minutes of Up. I think when Bing Bong fades out, man, it's like the saddest Pixar moment ever.
Yeah. I will say the Bing Bong moment didn't get me the first time I saw it, but I definitely felt the emotion, and of course, towards the end where joy learns to be sad a little bit, and sadness learns to be happy and smile, and it just almost kind of preaching the message. It seems like what they're going for is saying it's okay to feel these different emotions, because that's what makes you well-rounded and whole and human, and just it's natural to experience all these different types of things.
Yeah, and I mean, Pixar just. I'm not gonna say they can't make a movie I don't like because there is one. Every Pixar movie is great except for one, which I saw once and hated, and that was Brave. I just didn't like Brave. But apart from that, dude, Pixar's batting 900, I guess.
Yeah, I know you really loved their recent effort with Soul, and I thought that was a really good one too, and explored some complicated themes. So I will say, they have been kind of getting back to their stride, as of late. Like they've had some good hits, and hopefully they're getting back to when they first kind of launched and had all these great movies that they were churning out. So I'm interested to see what you pick now because I thought that was a pretty clear cut choice relating to this story.
Really, because I think mine is the ultimate clear cut choice, and it's a movie. Are you familiar with Darren Aronofsky? Okay, well, it's his first ever movie, and it's called Pi.
Okay.
There you go. Oh, there's the light click. So I actually last year for the first time ever watched Pi on Pi Day because I had it and I was always like, I'm gonna watch this on March 14th, just the way I do with Independence Day and that type of stuff. And so finally last year I had the time and I actually sat down to watch Pi and I'm an Aronofsky fan. I love Aronofsky movies. I love Requiem for a Dream. When I talk about film scores, Requiem for the Dream, top 5 film score ever made. Mother, first time I saw it, I was like, what the hell is this? Then I had to explain to me a little bit how it's, an allegory for religion. And so I'm not a religious person. So but I appreciated it more after understanding that. And so Pi, his first movie, it is along the Darren Aronofsky wave of what the hell am I watching? But it's good. I mean, Aronofsky is he's an atheist. He's a very out there atheist and everything. But he's obsessed. You can feel his obsession with religion. And Pi is about a guy who sees a series of numbers, 216 numbers, and he becomes obsessed with these numbers. And he goes to a synagogue and he talks to a rabbi or something. And the rabbi, they believe that the Torah. Some people believe that the Torah is a string of numbers, which is a code sent by God. And then, so this number just completely upends his life. It's a number that can manipulate the stock market. So then people start chasing him because they want this number to get in the stock market and stuff like that. Some people believe again that this 216, I had to write down some of my notes, but that's why I'm looking over here. But they believe that it's meant to bring forth the Messianic age, which I had to look up what that was. I had no idea. But apparently it's a future on earth where the Messiah brings peace and no evil. Sounds like a gnarly time. I hope I'm here for that.
Yeah, Pi is an interesting movie. It certainly is something you might have to watch a couple of times to maybe understand, but I did see this for the first time. I saw this for the first time in college, actually for one of my classes, and it was a film-related class. So, good pick on the professor for picking that one. And it's something that has to be digested a little bit, but I think it's definitely a unique and interesting film. It's in black and white. I don't think you mentioned that before, but when you're watching this, does the style also kind of remind you of David Fincher, his directing style a little bit watching this? Because when I think of Pi, it kind of reminds me of David Fincher's style a little bit too.
Yeah, kind of yeah, I guess because David Fincher has a real WTF, if you will, style of that type of storytelling. Trying to think of Mulholland Drive would be the kind of quintessential Fincher. Maybe Elephant Man back in the day. Yeah, it does have that. And I was reading up a little bit about Pi before today. He did it for 60 grand. That's why he shot black and white footage because black and white film stock, and he actually shot on 16 millimeter film. And so that's where most of that budget went. But that's why they shot black and white. Same reason Kevin Smith shot Clerks black and white, because black and white film stock is cheaper than color film stock. And so it's interesting. I like watching these movies because if you're, I don't know if you ever saw Following, which is Christopher Nolan's first movie, also shot in black and white. Really good movie. If you ever get the chance to check it out, it's called Following. If you like Nolan, then check it out. But yeah, it's I like watching these directors who have come out and become like huge. Then you go back and watch their first kind of independent shot for super cheap movie, and you really get, you see the specs of who they become or who they became. And with Aronofsky and Pie, man, his movies have continued to be just trippy, out there, religious based movies, and you can see that formation with Pie. All right, so next up on the docket, we got CNN had a story this week about the UK is launching some cruises to nowhere. Basically, just you get on the cruise, you just have a good time on the cruise, man. And so the reason I picked this story for me was because a couple of years back I went on an Alaskan cruise. My mother's 60th birthday. I was like, I got to do this big, and my mom's dream was to go on an Alaskan cruise, so I bought her an Alaskan cruise. And in all honesty, man, being on the boat was fun as hell, man. I could do a cruise to nowhere. I can do just get on a cruise and just sail. It's fun, man. So how about you?
Yeah, the reason they called this cruises to nowhere is because, and this is going to be for vaccinated passengers only, which is great because, you couldn't pay me to get on a cruise right now with, people who aren't vaccinated. But, so the reason they call it cruises to nowhere is because they're just going to kind of sail according to the weather and just kind of determine their destinations based on the conditions and just kind of cruise inside a general area, but not really have a pre-charted, this is exactly where we're going to go destination. So it sounded like a nifty idea. So, when maybe if I get my vaccination, if something like this is available kind of close to me, maybe it's something to consider. It sounds pretty fun. I feel like, again, this might be the theme of the episode. This might be a story where we could have the same movie kind of picked out relating to this news story from the past week. So, I feel like there's a pretty clear-cut example of a cruise, like people at sea. And for me, I'm going to go first with mine. I picked the movie Titanic, pretty straightforward. It's a movie about people on a cruise of sorts. And, this one, I'll be honest, I haven't seen it in a while. But of course, James Cameron, Leonardo DiCaprio, who hasn't seen this movie at some point, even if it's not all the way through because it is a long one. But, such a memorable cultural impact movie. And it's still up there in terms of the highest grossing movies of all time, which is pretty impressive considering it came out a fairly decent amount of time ago. And nowadays you have movies breaking $1 billion every so often. So it's impressive that this movie is still up there with the highest grossing ones of all time.
Yeah. I actually watched it last year, around this time last year, because I have the 3D version of it, which for my money, the Titanic conversion is probably the best 3D converted movie I've ever seen. It is the depth that they use in that movie is so phenomenal, and it's one of those movies I can watch every few years. I genuinely love it. My friends make fun of me because of how much I love Titanic. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it's a movie people should really make fun of each other for watching because a lot of people associate it with the romance plot in the movie. And people forget that it's really a great piece of filmmaking. Obviously, like I mentioned, James Cameron directed it, and he really went all out to do the research and really crafted the scenes from depictions in books and things that they found down at the wreckage. And, just a really good amount of fascinating behind the scenes stuff associated with this movie. If you can track down documentaries and special features on the DVDs and Blu-rays, a lot of fascinating stuff that went into the recreation of the sets and the research that they did going down to the wreckage when they found it. So it's really just a fascinating piece of filmmaking when you go back and look at some of the history behind it.
Yeah, he did a whole other documentary about it called Ghosts of the Abyss, which is another good 3D Blu-ray I got, where it's just fully about him diving down to the wreckage and everything. And that's a gnarly documentary about that, and it's just cool to see the actual Titanic on the floor of the ocean. So, with that, we did not pick the same movie. I went a little bit more upbeat with mine. I went with the film Out to Sea. You ever seen that? Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon? No? Oh. You know who Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon are?
I know the names. I can't say I can name a lot of their work.
Oh man, you gotta see their work, man. They are, when it comes to comedy, man, Grumpy Old Men, those movies, they're some of the funniest movies ever made, man. And Out to Sea is, it's kind of Grumpy Old Men, but on a boat. Basically, it's Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon. They get on a boat and cruise, and then Walter Matthau's, trying to find the rich woman on board, and Jack Lemmon is like the unwilling participant to go along with his friend, and it's just a hilarious movie, man. I remember back in the day, I think it came out in '97, and I went and saw it. I was visiting my grandma at the time, and we went and saw it in theaters. It's always nice going to see a movie with your grandma and having her laugh, and so that's a memory I have of that movie. And it's those guys, two of the greatest actors to ever live, man. Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, um, and you should check it out in terms of just good old school comedy.
So, a movie related story from this past week is that the movie Avatar has surpassed Avengers Endgame as now again the highest grossing movie of all time at the box office. So, it's funny to kind of watch these two huge movies go back and forth and outdo each other at the box office. And Avatar, it's because it got some re-releases and was able to surpass in dollars Avengers Endgame, and now it sits atop the box office again. And Avatar. I mean, this was a pretty revolutionary movie at the time in terms of visuals and effects, and we're obviously getting sequels in the future here. So sticking with the James Cameron theme, he came up with Avatar. So what did you think when you first kind of saw this in theaters? I mean, I hope you saw it on the big screen when it came out.
Oh yeah, I saw it a few times when that came out. I remember the first time I saw it, it was me and my pops went, my pops and I, and because it was like the first big 3D. It's the movie that really made 3D like massive here in the states, and being a big proponent of 3D, yeah, I went and saw it, and even my friends who don't normally see movies in theaters, they're those people. I actually got them to go out and see the movie with me because that's what type of movie Avatar was. It was if you're going to see anything, see this because you've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I'll agree with you where it put 3D on the map, and that was one of the few movies where 3D was worth it. There are movies that came out after that in 3D, and really it didn't add much to it visually or the experience. But Avatar, it was certainly worth it, and I did see it in 3D as well, and it was well worth it. It was visually striking. I mean, the plot is something that we've, of course, seen before that really wasn't too original or did too many new things, but obviously it was just an immersive experience and it was a whole new world. And there were stories I remember at the time of people who, excuse me, came out of the theaters after seeing it and almost had a little bit of a depression because they were going back to real life and the gray. It came out during the winter, so it was just a gray, kind of cold time. And it was so visually striking and colorful and impressive that it almost kind of affected people and how they reacted to real life after seeing it.
I remember those stories too, and yeah, good, sucks for those people. The story for me was like I saw a lot of people online talking about, oh, it's not the real champ because it had to be a re-release for it to take over Endgame, and it's like, all right, but if you remember, Endgame only overtook Avatar when it went into a re-release in the same year because Endgame came out, and then it was like, are they going to take it? But the original release of it didn't push it over the threshold. Then they re-released it, I don't know, 5, 6 months after or something like that, after it was released initially, and that's when it overtook Avatar. So, do you think at some point they're going to re-release Endgame? You think this is going to be a cat and mouse for the ages?
Maybe. I mean, it's not a big deal to me personally who is on top. They obviously still made a lot of money, and people like one or both or neither. So I don't really think it's a big deal, you know. And since this is a story about Avatar, I guess I didn't really mention it up top, but that was the movie that I picked relating to the story, obviously. So, and we've talked about Avatar a little bit already. So, did you have the same movie pick with Avatar?
I did. I did pick Avatar, and to go back to the story. So I think the big takeaway, a lot of the takeaway I had with the story too, was with the sequels coming out. I had a big question of whether or not the sequels, there was an appetite for the sequels when they come out. It seemed like when Avatar was, got a lot of credit, it became the highest grossing international movie. We should note the highest domestic is still Star Wars Force Awakens. That had like 900 million in the States alone, but this is international release. So it let me know that when the sequels come out, there's an appetite for these movies still. And I whereas before I was like, I wonder if they'll do well in box office dollars. With this story and with this re-release, it kind of lets me know, okay, the sequels are going to do well when they come out.
I think so because I think, especially with people not being able to see a lot of movies this past year, that even if you have a so-so movie, plot-wise, character-wise, if you have amazing visuals, that people will go see it these days. And that's a different conversation, kind of talking about that. But I think that means the sequels will have a place among audiences when they come out.
Are you anticipating the sequels or no?
Not really. They're not really on my radar. Depending on how they look, I might go see them in theaters just because them on the big screen might immerse me a little bit in it, a little more in it than watching it at home on my, 40 something inch TV, getting to experience it on the big screen or in IMAX. So we'll see. We'll see how they look. They're not really a high priority list for me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them. I don't think Cameron's made a movie I haven't enjoyed, so I'll go see these. But they have 5 of them on the pipeline. I don't know if we're gonna have some diminishing returns on that one.
We'll have to see.
All right, so a big story out of the sports world this week. If you remember earlier this year, a couple episodes ago, we covered Phillip Rivers retiring, and now we have Drew Brees retiring. And I was reading this article. I didn't realize, even though I'm a football fan and everything, I didn't realize the records this dude has, man. Did you know that about him?
Yeah, I guess I'm a better football fan than you because I remember staying up to watch one of the games that he had played in a few years back. And I think it was the single season, it was a completions record or something like that, where he broke a single season record, or maybe it was an all timer. But the point is, Drew Brees has been breaking records all his career, especially lately. Obviously, you need the time to pile up the stats to get to the career numbers. But, Drew Brees, what else can you say about him? First ballot Hall of Famer. The guy apparently is a class act. He has a great family that supports him. He's just such a likable guy that just still went out and competed every single game that he was in.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's a shame he only has one ring. A guy like that, it's a shame. But when you think about it, it's like you think one ring better than none. Dan Marino goes down as one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. He played in one Super Bowl. You know who he lost to? 49ers. So he never got his ring. But it's one of the stats in there that threw me that I didn't know was he's the only player to have 5 seasons with over 5,000 yards, 5,000 yards, and there is no other quarterback who has multiple 5,000 yard seasons. There may be other quarterbacks that have one 5,000 yard season, but nobody other than Brees has more than one, and he has 5. That was an insane stat.
Yeah, just very impressive overall. And, isn't that how it always goes? The most talented quarterbacks have the least amount of Super Bowls, while other people are just riding the coattails to multiple rings. So, this allows you to go in a couple different directions with a story relating to a movie. And, I'm interested to hear kind of what you pick for this first.
All right. There are a lot of good football movies out there. You could have went with football. Could have went with the New Orleans story. I went with a childhood favorite. I hope you've seen this movie. You better have seen this movie, Little Giants. All right. Thank God. Thank God you've seen Little Giant. I mean, that for me is it's an all-time favorite childhood movie, man. When I still say intimidation like that, I say intimidation. Remember when they put the Alka-Seltzers in their mouth and the foams? And it's just you get what is it, Ed O'Neill, Rick Moranis, man, and it's it's one of those. Back when I was a kid, probably when you were like 2, but when I was like 10, they made kids sports movies, man. This is the era of Little Giants. This is the era of The Sandlot. This is the era of Mighty Ducks. I don't think they make movies like that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's an age-old discussion where, people that were born in a certain time say they just don't make them like they used to. So I feel like this is a conversation that all types of generations have. But I'm with you where this felt like it came out in a time period where they did make a lot of good kids sports movies. And I'm with you where I'm a fan of Little Giants as well. I wouldn't say it was quite as much of a favorite as maybe it was for you. It was definitely a movie that I saw and I liked as a kid, but it's not one that I go back and watch occasionally because I think, oh, it's been way too long since I've seen this. And that for me is maybe a movie like The Sandlot or a couple others where these are ones that I used to watch all the time as a kid. So Little Giants, I still really liked it. I still think it's a fun, movie to go back and watch, a fun interactive kids movie.
Yeah, yeah. What more can I say other than let's hear your pick?
Yeah, so I kind of ABC'd this one a little bit. Spring break kind of takes place in New Orleans. It's one of those kind of destinations that people go to on their break to party and to kind of have a good time besides Florida and some of the other popular destinations. So for this one, I actually picked the movie Spring Breakers because spring break takes place in New Orleans. People go down there to sometimes to party and have a good time. So I feel like this is an interesting movie because it's kind of opens a couple different discussions about what it was trying to do and the performances and whether people love it or hate it. And for me, this was just kind of down the middle. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, but it was certainly trying to do its own thing and be something creative. And James Franco certainly gave a performance in it, to say the least.
Yeah, Spring Breakers is. I enjoyed it, man. It's Harmony Korine who made Kids, and he made Beach Bum recently. The guy makes he's another one of those directors that makes it's his style. You watch a Harmony Korine movie, you're watching a Harmony Korine movie, and I think that movie got a lot of attention because it was it Vanessa Hudgens and Selena Gomez were in it. And they were shedding their little Disney images.
Yeah, at the time, because the 4 kind of main young female cast members were all sort of Disney stars, and to see them in a different light like that in a more adult setting with different things going on was, I think, a shock to the system for a lot of people. And maybe they did that on purpose to try to get the movie more traction with mainstream audiences. But it was certainly interesting beyond just the people that were cast in it.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I mean Franco, man, that guy he's another one, man. He makes some weird choices with the stuff he does. Because I think wasn't that around the same time he was a pretty big star at that point. He went back and started doing daytime soaps. So he's made some interesting choices. And there was a rapper that apparently tried to sue the movie, if I'm remembering correctly, saying that Franco stole his personality for the movie or something. I might be remembering that incorrectly, but
yeah. So Spring Breakers, it's an odd movie, and it seems like it's a really love it or hate it movie. So it's one that maybe people haven't really thought of that much since it came out. So hopefully, maybe if they're listening to this, they go back, check it out, and maybe have a new opinion on it, or if they haven't seen it before, sit there and say, well, I thought this was good or this was not good. So hopefully people kind of take a look at it and see, well, it did hold up over time or maybe it didn't. So, big in entertainment news this past week was obviously the Grammys were held over the past week, and this was a little bit of a different ceremony due to the circumstances going on right now with the pandemic. So, people were socially distanced, and part of it was virtual, and things were pre recorded, and obviously, they couldn't really have everybody there or do as big of a red carpet thing. So, did you tune in at all? Did you kind of have a stake in some of the artists that were on display for the Grammys?
No, I haven't. I haven't watched the Grammy ceremony. I think in my entire life, it's for me the Grammys is the equivalent to the MTV Music Awards. It's not about honoring the best in music, man. It's a popularity contest. I don't like the Grammys at all.
That's fair, and an argument could be made for that. People have vastly different music tastes, but I think it's hard to determine what is the best in music. Because people's opinions differ on what is a good genre, bad genre, who's a good artist, bad artist. So I'm with you where I tuned in a little bit, and I'll be honest, and I kind of looked over the list of the winners. I really didn't know that many of these people. I had heard of some of them, but I couldn't tell you almost anyone's music there, just have a conversation about anyone's music that was nominated or that won. So I guess maybe that just means I'm old, uncool, and out of touch with what kids like these days. But I will say, to kind of relate it to the story, of course, I did know who Billie Eilish was, and I do know some of her music because it's gotten airtime on the radio and it's made its way into different commercials and promos and that sort of thing. So I did know who Billie Eilish was, and I used kind of her to relate a movie to this story. So she's doing the new kind of song on the soundtrack for the new James Bond movie coming out, No Time to Die, which is eventually going to come out. So I use that to relate it to a movie where I just want one Bond movie previously, which is Spectre. And this one, I felt like it was pretty by the numbers. It was pretty average for a Bond movie. I get what they were trying to go for with some of the homages and the way that it looked and what happened, but I felt like given the material and the people in this movie that were cast, that it just didn't live up to its potential.
007 movies. Besides, I haven't seen a single 007 movie except for the Daniel Craig ones. Those are the only ones I've ever seen. I enjoy them for what they are. They don't stick in my memory super well. I thought, what was it, Christoph Waltz? I enjoyed his performance as was it Blofeld, I think was his name, and the trailers for the new No Time to Die look pretty gnarly, man. I'm interested to see Rami Malek as the bad guy.
Yeah, I think No Time to Die hopefully is a return to form for the Bond franchise because a lot of people were really tepid on Spectre that they didn't think James Bond versus this evil global organization really lived up to the hype, that it kind of just didn't live up to its potential. And again, Christoph Waltz, I think really he's a great actor, but he just didn't have enough to do in the movie.
So my movie pick, I just went with the movie about music, and I actually watched it last night because I hadn't seen it. That's kind of why I enjoyed doing this, was because a lot of times I like picking movies I haven't seen in a while, so I can go back and watch them. So last night I watched Get 'Em to the Greek, which is the spin-off movie of Forgetting Sarah Marshall about Aldous Snow, and what's it, Russell Brand. I'm a big Russell Brand fan. I have his books. I enjoyed listening to the guy. The guy is super smart, super deep. I'm a big Russell Brand fan, and Jonah Hill, man. I enjoy watching his comedy performances. I love his drama performances too, but his comedy performances, I think the guy is a super gifted improv actor. Like, he comes up with some lines that you can feel that they weren't scripted, but they're absolutely hilarious. They're just these one-liner quips that he has that are just hilarious.
I think we might differ a little bit on Get Him to the Greek because I saw this when it came out and I thought it was okay. I thought it was one of those movies where they took something that was good in small doses, which is Russell Brand's character from Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and he was great in that. And they took something that was good in small doses and made it into its own movie. And I don't think it went quite as well as they were hoping. At least for me, I just didn't really think it was quite as strong as, again, relating it to the movie that it branched off of, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So it was entertaining. It had some different stuff going for it. And the songs are certainly funny, the fake, songs from the movie. But I thought this one was just okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to Forgetting Sarah Marshall, it doesn't compare. Forgetting Sarah Marshall is a top 10 comedy for me. But I think what I appreciated about it was it definitely delved into, it's a comedy movie, but, it delves into the end of perception versus reality, because the movie really delves into, when you think about this rock star and he has this great life and he has sex with women, the hottest women, and he just has a great life. But the truth is he's a lonely, broken human being. And so I liked that they kind of hit in that at the end, how your perception of him on the outside isn't the reality of him. And that's where his drug abuse comes from and all that stuff. And I thought that was handled pretty well with that kind of veering storytelling.
Yeah, I think they did pretty well to touch on that a little bit. It maybe didn't go as deep as I would have liked into that subject material and really explore that emotion or the drama, because it was a comedy movie at heart. But I did appreciate that they kind of touched on that a little bit and showed it's almost like a peek behind the curtain. So Russell Brand, I think, is a great actor. And again, I just didn't really think the movie was as good or as funny as what it branched off of, or even just standing on its own at the end of the day, what it was trying to do, if it was really super effective as a comedy or as a great movie. But, it was solid. It was a pretty decent, and Jonah Hill working off of Russell Brand, the two of them as a pair in the movie are funny. So it was a pretty decent movie overall, I thought.
Yeah, and I'll end with a fun tidbit. Rose Byrne is in the movie. If you're familiar with her, she's my cousin's sister-in-law. Fun fact. All right, last but not least, this week we have our triumphant return to new movie of the week, because this week a pretty massive new release came out on HBO Max, and that is the 4-hour Zack Snyder's Justice League. And so pretty monumental release. Internet seems to be pretty abuzz about it, man. I don't think I've read too many negative responses about the movie. So first and foremost, I'll ask, you watched it, you dug it. What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think relating to our podcast, this isn't only a new release movie that we get to talk about, but it is a story. There is a long saga for this movie being made and released, and we won't go into the entire history lesson here, but the fact that this movie exists is amazing to me. And I did watch it on Thursday when it came out. I waited a little bit. I didn't stay up until 3 a.m. Eastern time and then watch a 4-hour movie, because that would have been super difficult. But I did wait a little bit because initially this movie crashed HBO Max when it was released, when they hit the button and it went out live. So I'm glad I waited a little bit, kind of a little bit later in the morning. But I did watch it entirely through in one sitting, 4 hours. And I'm glad I did, because I don't really like when I watch a movie and watch it in pieces. I like watching it as a whole, as it's intended to be watched, consecutively. So, and I really dug this movie, and we'll get into why and specifics, but, just in general, my general opinion, I really liked it. What did you think of it?
Oh yeah, man, I was a fan. Prior to watching this, I went back and watched the DC extended universe movies leading up to it. I watched Man of Steel. I watched the extended cut of Batman versus Superman, and then I watched Suicide Squad. And so it was interesting, watching those movies to get ready for this one, because I didn't really remember them that well. They weren't movies that I've watched too many times, but I watched the extended cut of the Batman versus Superman, which kind of relates to this, and the fact that the theatrical cut I remember seeing in theaters and kind of being like, this was okay. But it's like just 30 extra minutes or whatever it is in the extended cut, which is the director's cut R rated, really made a difference in that movie, because even the Martha reveal in that movie in the extended cut plays so much better, because it becomes it's it's more obvious that it's not that the mom has the same name. It's the fact that Superman has a mom, and that is more realized in the extended cut. It's not as comical, really. It's not as cheesy. It's the fact that Batman is finally seeing Superman as a human, as a person with a mother, and really, it's kind of with this movie now being as good as it was, it's kind of like, all right, let Zack Snyder make his freaking movies.
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of unpacking what you said about Batman v Superman, and I think it's called the Ultimate Edition, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but and that is on HBO Max as well. I don't even think they have the theatrical cut on HBO Max. I think you might be able to buy it on DVD, but I don't think it's available on streaming, the theatrical cut, because I think they realized their mistake and just want to make this one the definitive, the Batman v Superman movie that came out in terms of the different cuts. And I think you're right. I think a lot like this movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Batman v Superman extended cut is far superior to the theatrical cut. And it makes you think, why didn't they just release it in the first place? Is because studio interference, which is the same story behind Justice League, and they didn't want to go full on with Zack Snyder's vision for the movie, and he had to make compromises, and the studio decided to make certain cuts and cut stuff out and do certain things. So unfortunately, that played a part in the original theatrical release. But thankfully, like this movie, like Zack Snyder's Justice League, we have a director's cut that is far superior of the previous movie, Batman v Superman.
Yeah, yeah. And to launch into Justice League, the first thing I noticed, did the 4:3 aspect ratio throw you at all? Because it threw me for a little bit.
I think it was something where it was a little strange to me at first, but I got used to it as the movie went on. And I don't think we set it up top when we introed this movie, but we're not going to go into spoilers. This movie just came out days ago, so this is spoiler free. We're going to be talking about it, but the 4:3 kind of threw me off a little bit, but the reason for that is because, and I'll explain to people who may not know, when you shoot in IMAX, it's actually closer to that aspect ratio, the 4:3 aspect ratio, which means the framing of the final product, how it's more like a square than a rectangle. And when you convert it to 16:9, which is kind of the more rectangle shape for how the final product looks on a screen, they actually just kind of press in a little bit more on the footage. They just zoom in a little bit more and just kind of crop it out on the existing kind of 4:3 IMAX format to make it 16:9. They just kind of press in a little bit more on it. So there was nothing really being cut off in the frame. There was nothing that wasn't really included where there was an object over here that you couldn't see because it was in a little bit of a different format. It was just how they decided to release it, and that was a decision by Zack Snyder to preserve his original vision for the film, is to shoot it in that aspect ratio.
Yeah, you explained it better than I ever could. But Chris Nolan does this, and he fills the frame. He shoots with IMAX cameras, and he releases them on video where they cut between a 235 and I think it's a 178 or whatever it is in the aspect ratio department. And those home releases, I love them because they cut from your widescreen and it fills your frame, it fills your screen, man. You're watching this movie on a giant screen, like an 80-inch TV or something. Those black bars on the side, kind of, for about 10 minutes, I kept thinking, all right, when's this going to go? When are we going to get the full screen? And I actually had to look on the phone while a movie was playing and see that, nope, the entire movie's 4:3. And, after about 10 minutes, like you said, I got used to it, but not a fan of that choice. I want the movie to fill my screen. I appreciate IMAX image because I love IMAX, but there is a way to do IMAX that fills your screen, which isn't the way Zack Snyder did it. One of my few complaints, but not a big one.
That's fair. Everyone has their own personal preference, but I will say the people that have been talking about the movie the last couple of days, that's not something a lot of people have really brought up and complained about or even said that they really liked. So it seems like something that's kind of just flown under the radar that people have just kind of accepted, which I like. They just kind of didn't question this different format that he kind of released it in.
Yeah, well, I wonder what, because I think on the internet you're dealing with a lot of film geeks, like us, jock bodies, film geek jock bodies. I wonder what the general public who hates, who's going to see that and be completely jarred by it is going to think. You don't really get those views on the internet.
No, so let's dive into the actual movie itself, and I'll start with the very beginning. And again, we're not going to go into spoilers here, so feel free to keep listening if you haven't seen it yet. But from the very first shot, you could tell this was a much different movie than the 2017 version. I won't say exactly what they open on, but you can tell from the very first shot that this is a totally different movie. Never mind if you didn't read any reviews or anything. As soon as you're watching it, you can see that Zack Snyder's Justice League is completely different.
Oh yeah, it is definitely from frame one. They change it up. I feel bad for the actor Holt McCallany, who also does Manhunter on Netflix, because if you remember the Justice League, the Joss Whedon version, there was that opening scene with him as the kind of the bad guy, and Batman stalks him a little bit, and he was completely cut out of the movie, which I feel bad because I'm a fan of that guy's acting.
Well, I will say before you go any further, feel bad for the people that were cut from the 2017 version, because a lot more people were included in this version, and a lot more people got to show off a lot of their acting ability, including the stars. So yeah, we didn't get that scene in this version, that one little scene, but I think a lot more people got to show up in this one than the 2017 version.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm a fan of that actor, so I was like, I wanted to see him. I wanted to see him in this big 2021 movie. Yeah, you definitely start off, different. I'm going to knock out, before we get into the stuff I love, there are a few things I didn't like. One of them being, there's the pop songs in this movie, man. When Aquaman is on the whatever that thing's called, in the water, and after he saves the guy and he's on the thing getting ready to go back into the ocean, dock, couldn't think of the word dock, and instead of like some big swell of like score music, he puts like some horrible cheesy song called, I think it was called This Is a Kingdom or something, and it just was like, it took that scene for me and just made it so cheesy and geeky, versus if a big swell of score music, and they have Tom Holkenberg doing the score, the guy's phenomenal, that would have made that scene more epic, more slow mo. And then he does the same thing with the first Flash scene with the girl who gets in the accident. And instead of some gnarly score music to kind of slow motion saves girl, it's some cheesy song. And it just made those scenes for me like laughable.
I'm gonna have to really disagree with you on that. I feel like that's maybe a personal preference about what you were expecting versus what was presented to you, and just evaluating whether or not that was good in the moment, what you were kind of hoping for versus what you got, and maybe that's what made some people dislike this version or 2017's version. But I understand where you're coming from, where maybe his music choices in a couple scenes were a little disorienting. But I really liked, for instance, and again, we're not going to go into spoilers here, so don't reveal anything else. You kind of talked about the scenes a little bit already, but the scene with Flash where you're first kind of introduced to him and something happens and they have like a little bit of song behind it. I honestly didn't mind that music choice. I thought it kind of went with the imagery and the things that were going on between him and the other characters. So I actually didn't mind that music choice. I thought it was fitting of the scene. The Aquaman one you're kind of talking about, maybe it was a little out there, but if you don't take some risks, then people aren't really going to remember the movie as much.
All right, well, agree to disagree on that one. Because, yeah, those scenes for me were completely ruined by the horrible music choices. For me, another thing, I'm just not a fan of the dude who played Cyborg, man. Everybody else in the movie was so good, and that guy, I thought that guy sucked.
Okay, well, I will say you're in the very, very minority on that, because a lot of people that have been watching this movie and kind of dissecting it have been saying that Cyborg was the heart of the team in this movie, and he got so much more to work with than the 2017 version about how much they cut him out and why he was so kind of pissed off in real life and kind of got in hot water with the studio because he spoke out against them about all his scenes being cut and the way he was treated on set by the replacement director Joss Whedon. I think you're in the very vocal minority on that, but this was, keep in mind though, in fact, this was one of Ray Fisher, the actor's first movies. So I understand if maybe there's some room to grow with his acting ability, but I honestly didn't mind him as an actor, and I thought he did well with what he was given in this one in Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I will disagree and say I thought Cyborg was a very good part in the movie and really kind of brought the team together in different ways and had a lot more to do in this one to show what he was capable of and what he brings to the table.
Well, to be clear, I'm not saying I don't like the Cyborg character, because I do like the Cyborg character. And obviously, Joe Morton playing his father. I love Joe Morton. More Joe Morton is always a good thing. It's just that guy, the guy playing him, whatever his name was, Ray Fisher. Yeah, I thought he was trying too hard to be brooding, and he just didn't pull it off for me.
Fair enough. So, let's get into some of the things that you did like about the movie because there was a lot that I liked as well. Something I think you touched on earlier is the score was redone for a lot of this movie. And, Tom Holbring, I think his name is, or Junkie XL as he's known as. Hulkenberg, sorry. So, he redid a lot of the score for this movie, and I think that is a vast improvement over the 2017 version. There was a particular piece that kind of stood out to people and stood out to me as well, where wherever Wonder Woman is on screen, there's this fantastic piece of music in the background that accompanies her, something a little bit different than her theme from her movies, which is still in there in parts, but some new score behind Wonder Woman especially, and throughout the movie that just really stood out to people that people really liked.
Yeah, Hulkenberg is phenomenal, dude. He did the Mad Max Fury Road score, which is one of the best scores ever made. Yeah, there's some good music used in this, man. There's a flash scene towards the end where there's a music cue and that were just like, that's what I was looking for when I talk about those Aquaman scenes and that earlier flash scene where it's just like that music cue in that scene pumped you up. Like that made that scene so much more than it just was like, yes, that's the scene. And yeah, that in terms of music, man, I thought it was good.
So, just overall, I was thinking about an analogy to kind of tell people that compared the 2017 version of this movie to the version that we just got here in 2021. And the only analogy I could kind of come up with is, let's say the 2017 version of Justice League is a skeleton, just the bare bones, the minimal amount that you can have for it to be called a movie and to survive on its own. And then I feel like this movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League, came along and added everything else, made a complete human body out of it with everything else added to the bare bones minimum, the skeleton of the 2017 movie. It built on everything that was presented in 2017 and made it 10 times better with this version.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. Because I went back, I watched Justice League, the 2017 version the other day. And I'll give that one props. I watched it in 3D. And in terms of 3D, it had some really good 3D, man. That was pretty strong 3D. In terms of the movie, yeah, the villain in that version was not good. It wasn't well done. And in this one, he had, ooh, hello, Belly. He had more of a backstory. He had more of he wasn't top of the food chain, he had bosses. And then in the 2007 version, he didn't have bosses. He was just, I'm there to take over the world. And in this one, he felt more like, like he was beholden to his boss's dark side, I think is what the guy's name is. And so that was a much more fleshed out villain than the original just CGI BS that they had in that version.
Yeah, I think you're right. Where in this version, everything is more fleshed out. Not just the villain, but obviously the main characters and their motivations and their backstory and their characterization. Everything is a lot more fleshed out than the 2017 version, where that was thing that was the thing where people had to say about the 2017 version with the villain is just that he was a generic "I'm going to conquer the world" bad guy, and he didn't look that good in the final product either. And this not only added depth to his character as well, but also vastly improved his look as well.
Yeah, and it's a testament too because the little scene extensions that I noticed from the 2007 the Justice League, I think is what I saw the internet calling it. But between that version and this version, which is like towards the end, there's a scene with I'm no spoilers, don't worry, but with Billy Crudup playing the Flash's father, and in the 2017 version, it kind of just comes in and it's a scene, and you're like, oh, that's nice. And in this version, that scene comes up. It gives it just a little. It's almost like 30 extra seconds, maybe, of that scene, and then that makes that scene go from that was okay, okay, nice little father to oh my god, that's a tear-inducing moment, man.
I 1000% agree because again, it builds on everything that the bare bones minimum that they had in the 2017 version is just built on in this one, and really just makes you empathize and feel for the characters a lot more in Zack Snyder's Justice League. And again, they again built on what was kind of already there, but it just makes it watching this, it makes the 2017 version look even worse in hindsight. And good on Warner Brothers for allowing Zack Snyder to do this in the first place and backing him on making this version of Justice League. But it also took some effort from them to admit that by releasing this movie, they're subconsciously saying, yes, we really messed up the 2017 one. So it opens a lot of interesting questions, and a lot of people are already calling for it, where maybe now they start to head back in that direction. Maybe Zack Snyder is a producer or takes on a creative voice role in movies going forward with some of these properties and some of these maybe movies that Justice League has set up where they go in different directions, but Zack Snyder is kind of overseeing it all, that people are saying restore the Snyderverse of sorts.
So no studio is perfect, but I'll give you Warner Brothers in terms of the risk they're taking. I mean, Joker, that was a risk to take making that movie. Now this movie, they allowed him to come back and do, a 4 hour epic shot in 4:3. I'm sure that was a discussion they had. They let the guy come back and do his thing after, almost, I've heard several stories of why he left the production originally. There's the tragic story, and then there's also that he was button heads with Warner Brothers before all of that, and they were getting ready to fire him because of that. And it's exactly what you said, man. This movie is essentially saying we effed up, man. And I think Warner Brothers I like what they're doing in terms of the risks they're taking with their properties, and that's the thing too. You get towards the, I don't know how to phrase this without. I don't think we're going out of the realm of saying it. It sets it. There's potential for sequels with this. I'm not sure I like that in the fact that are we ever going to get these sequels? I see what you're saying. Are they going to go? But depending on how well this movie does, are they going to say, okay, let's go back to the well and do it? Or they could say one and done, and then it kind of feels incomplete.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting in the near future here to see what they do. Like I said, a lot of people after seeing this movie, Zack Snyder's Justice League, have said restore the Snyderverse, and that they want to see the movies that have been set up by this one, these different directions that they can go in with characters and storylines. And hopefully if there's enough support and they really see that a lot of people are watching it and a lot of people really support it and it's getting great reviews, that maybe they hopefully see maybe we should go back in this direction that Zack Snyder kind of started us in a while ago. And you touched on it a little bit where, this movie maybe is a sign of the studio wanting to go in a direction where they let directors make the films that they want to make. Because surprise, surprise, when you let them do that, they make great films like Joker and like this one and other ones where if you let the director realize their full vision and it's a little bit out there and it's a little bit different and it's a really well made movie, that people will show up to see it and support it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd like to say that studios have learned their lesson, but history is indicated that that ain't true. I mean, there's always going to be studio interference, but if they can get out of their own way and allow directors to come in like that, I mean, you would have never expected Todd Phillips, the guy who made Hangover, the guy who made Due Date, Road Trip, to come around and make one of the greatest, movies about mental health ever made, and Zack Snyder, he's been one of those directors who 300 is a solid movie. Watchmen, the movie, I absolutely love. His Dawn of the Dead, so good. One of the best remakes ever made. So the guy is a talented filmmaker and stuff, and I can understand why the studio went back and went to Joss Whedon. The guy made Avengers. The guy made the first Avengers. I don't, he comes on. I think they were thinking, the guy made Avengers for Marvel. He's going to make Justice League for DC. It's going to be, I think maybe Joss Whedon might get too much crap because he was inheriting somebody else's film, and it might have been at that point too far down the rabbit hole for him to make a Joss Whedon Justice League movie versus following the WB directive at the time to make a commercial blah 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 movie.
So that part's up for debate. How much of it is Joss Whedon and how much of it is the studio or Zack Snyder? And you could see the end result. It's just a confused mess, and it doesn't really work on any of the different levels it kind of goes for in the 2017 version. But you kind of touched on a little bit where maybe Warner Brothers at the time of the original making of this movie in 2017 with Justice League, maybe they were going to fire Zack Snyder anyway, or maybe it was the tragedy that kind of drew him away from this movie. But delving into that a little bit, for those who may not know, obviously in 2017, Zack Snyder, who was making this movie, his daughter, Autumn, committed suicide at the age of 20, and it caused, obviously, a big tragedy in the family that made him ultimately step away from the movie because he originally wanted to keep making it and kind of distract himself from what was going on, but ultimately had to step away. And this movie, this isn't a spoiler, but at the very end of the movie, right before the credits, there's a little message that says "For Autumn," and man, if that just doesn't make you, kind of well up a little bit, that he made this for his daughter, and it was really tough for him to do, and both him and his wife are proud of it, and it's a tribute to his daughter, and it's a living testament to her memory.
Yeah, you said it well enough. I'm not going to add anything.
Well, and I will just expand on it just a little bit to kind of give you a little bit, not an Easter egg, but a little kind of fact where in the end credits, there's a version of Hallelujah that's sung. And the reason that was included, the reason it was in the trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League a little bit ago, a few months back, is because that was his daughter's favorite song. And to add another bit of layering to it, the person who sings it in the credits of Zack Snyder's Justice League was actually a friend of the daughter's who sang it at her funeral. So I thought that was a really kind of touching tribute. And people have been, not only to get this movie made, but also after it had aired, have been making lots of donations in Zack Snyder's name and bringing awareness to the American Suicide Prevention Fund. And I think that's an absolutely amazing thing to kind of come out of this. And if you look at the movie, and again, this isn't a spoiler, but there's a scene where Bruce and Barry are kind of driving in a car onto a highway, and the shot lingers on a billboard that actually represents that organization that draws attention to suicide prevention. And honestly, I didn't catch that the first time I saw it. I had to go back and watch it and find it again. But just the fact that they included that means so much to me that I really thought it was great that they included it.
Right on. Yeah, I don't. You said it well enough. I have nothing to add. So to lighten it up a little bit, I'll go back to what is my favorite scene of the movie, which comes towards the end. And honestly, I am a Joker fan. I'm a Joker fanatic. Joker is probably my all-time favorite screen character. And so I am a massive fan of Jared Leto and his Joker performance in this movie. I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, I loved it.
Yeah, I think he had a lot more to kind of work with in terms of bringing a different sort of character to life with the Joker in this one, the brief scene that we see him in Zack Snyder's Justice League as the Joker versus when he was in Suicide Squad. And it feels like two totally different people. It feels like two totally different performances. And I'll admit, I wasn't a fan of his Joker in Suicide Squad. I didn't think it was really that special or that captivating, but now after watching his Joker scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League, now I want to see more of him. I want to see what he can do when he's given some good writing and some good scenes to work with.
Yeah, man, it was night and day. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't in Suicide Squad. I didn't mind him that much. I understood, he was playing more of like he was almost playing a pimp in Suicide Squad, and in this one, he was playing it more like a psychotic villain to Batman. And dude, I loved it, man. I was, if I don't even watch the whole movie again, I can just go back to that scene again and just watch. That scene was my favorite scene of the movie. There's so many great scenes in that movie. I mean, there are scenes where if you were in a theater, obviously this was released to theaters and you can't go to theaters really right now, but I could hear the theater erupting in claps. Like I heard it in my mind's eye. Where there were so many scenes in this movie where you were just like, "That's a clap scene, man. That's the theater." If I was in the theater with a bunch of fanboys all around me, masked up, obviously, um, I could hear the theater erupting. And this movie had a lot of those scenes, man. It did it so well, man. And the Joker, I hope they release a figure of that Joker, man. I want a figure.
Yeah, I'm with you where, I think it adds a certain dimension to a movie if you see it in theaters versus at home, because I think seeing it with the crowd and seeing it on a big screen and seeing it in a movie setting helps you like a movie a little bit more. It helps you like and get into it a little bit more versus watching it on your couch at home on your much smaller size TV. So I would have really loved to see this movie on the big screen as well. I'm with you on that. But let's just kind of fly through and talk about some other things in the movie that you either liked or didn't like. Obviously you have things that are different from the 2017 version of Justice League, but what did you think about things like the action or the dialogue or just these small things that were, again, built on from the very bare bones foundation of the 2017 version?
Yeah, I think it's less cheesy. So the 2017 version was super cheesy because it was a super rote, super run of the mill. Oh, the bad guy is going to take over the world. And one thing I did right, and one thing that was really well done in this one was the 2017 version. It was almost like they all didn't have to be there. It was just like, oh, okay, none of them really had to be there. Maybe Superman, that's all. This movie, I really appreciated that every single one in the movie, Cyborg, Wonder Woman, I'm not going to name them all. We know who's in the movie, but they all had to be there. They all served a purpose to be there, which made it a Justice League movie. And I really appreciated that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Everyone had a purpose in the movie. Everyone had their moment to shine. Everyone had a thing where they were useful and they came into the bigger picture and they served their purpose. And you're right, where everyone is saying that too, where they felt more like a team in this one. they didn't feel like a team when you go back and you watch the 2017 version now, or even when you saw it at the time. They feel like a team working together in this one. And that sounds like something so simple that they should have been able to do the first time around. But you really realize how they didn't, but how they did it right in this one, where they're all working together as a team and everybody has their arc, their purpose. Everyone has a lot more dimension to them in terms of the main characters in the league. So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that.
Um, I think another thing was, a lot of people, I'm still seeing criticisms for Ezra Miller's Flash and the comedy he brings to it. I liked it. I thought I enjoyed the levity he brought to those scenes, and I like Ezra Miller. I've been a fan of Ezra Miller since the first time I saw Perks of Being a Wallflower. I think the guy's a very talented actor, and I enjoyed. I don't know much about comic books, and so I think we've established that over these episodes, and so I don't know the Flash character is. I'm sure in the comic book he's meant to be lighthearted and comical. Maybe you can touch on that more. Is that what he is?
Honestly, I can't really speak much to that either. I will say I really haven't read that many Flash comics or really know how he's supposed to be, in quotes. But I will say that I'm one of those people that maybe didn't really like his Flash that much in the 2017 version. And I'll be honest, the characterization of him, I still don't really love in terms of the jokey, he's a kid, more kid like than the other people on the team. I'm really still not in love with that much, but I will say I really liked him a lot more in Zack Snyder's Justice League than the 2017 version. I liked his character a lot more. I liked his personality more. I liked his dialogue that he was given more in this one. And again, no spoilers, but he was given a lot more really cool action scenes or things to do that took advantage of his powers in this one. So I will say I liked his character a lot more in this version than in the 2017 Justice League.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It was good to see the actors have more to do, and maybe you read up about all that. I'm not entirely sure. I know the Joker scene was shot new. I know maybe do a deep dive once I watch it again about exactly what shots are brand new versus what shots were previously filmed.
Yeah, I can't speak for that per se. I'm not sure exactly what was new and what was old or retweaked or again they kind of messed with or any of that. And I'm sure it's pretty intricate because of the production process and the process of making this new version of the movie. I'm sure it's very involved. And I'm sure at some point we'll see some sort of documentary that covers it from start to finish about the troubled production of the 2017 version up to the end and the release of this Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'm sure we'll see some kind of mini documentary that kind of goes through it and says what happens in detail. But I will say that it really does make a difference. Them even if they added only a few new scenes in this one, and a lot of this was unused footage from 2017. That again, it made all the difference. Just adding even a little bit of new stuff in there, it just added so much depth to everything and really made it a more complete film in the end.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think we may have talked about this in in an episode prior, but did you appreciate the trolling that Zack Snyder did with the trailer versus the movie in terms of the Joker "We live in a society" thing, where it was in the trailer and then it wasn't even in the movie?
I will say I wasn't really aware of that meme when I saw the trailer, so I guess it didn't really hit for me as much. But, to each their own. And if you'll notice, this doesn't really have anything to do with that Joker kind of line of dialogue, but there's actually a cameo by Zack Snyder that I managed to notice the first time around watching the movie pretty early on. And again, this isn't a spoiler, but Lois Lane, Amy Adams, is coming out of a cafe. And if you look closely, Zack Snyder's sitting there at the bar. You can see through the window. He made a little cameo. And I remember the first time I watched it, because yes, I have seen it twice. I watched it once all the way through, and then I watched it periodically throughout the rest of the day again after that. But I will say I did notice that Zack Snyder cameo the first time, and he's sitting there right in the window. And I say for a second to myself, I'm thinking, wait a minute, is that Zack Snyder? And sure enough, I double checked myself after I watched the movie, and yes, he does have a little cameo in there, so good for him.
Oh yeah, I like those little Hitchcockian things, those director cameos you get. So we've been on this for a while, so let's wrap it up with best comic book movie ever, as I've seen some people proclaim on the internet. Where does it fall in your timeline, your list?
That's tough. I think I still need some more time for this to sink in, and for doing some active thinking, comparing it to other comic book movies in the past. But I think my knee jerk reaction that I will say, for me personally, I think this is a top 10 for me in terms of superhero comic book movies. Maybe a top five. Again, I'm not entirely sure yet. I need more time for it to sink in. I need time to kind of think about it and compare it to other ones. And it's going to be a little bit tough because some of those are like comparing apples to oranges. But I will say in conclusion, I really like this one. And I will say for the future, we kind of talked about it a little bit, where I hope they go back in this direction. I really hope this is the rebirth of the, as they call it, Snyderverse, where they explore these different storylines and different characters and cliffhangers that this movie established. I really hope they do.
I agree with that. I want to see the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. I like David Ayer as a filmmaker. I think the guy's phenomenal, and he's another one who's been pretty vocal about the movie was taken out of his hands. And I would love, hopefully this does well, and hopefully the internet starts clamoring for the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I'd be interesting to see the Ayer cut if it came out. I'll be honest, I didn't really like Suicide Squad that much. I thought it was pretty messy and disjointed and wasn't really of great quality. But I will say, if there's another Batman v Superman or Justice League level director's cut out there that could be made, or maybe just reshot a tiny bit to kind of add a lot more stuff to it, that sure, I'd be interested. And I'd certainly give that a watch to check it out and make a judgment based off of that, if David Ayer is telling the truth about how his original vision was kind of taken over.
Yeah. The guy's a great filmmaker. I would very much like to see that. In terms of comic book movies, for me, I don't think anything will ever top Batman and Robin. For me, just the best comic book movie ever made. Now, Dark Knight, I don't think anything will top Dark Knight in terms of comic book movie for me. But I think, like you said, I can see this settling nicely into a top five all-time comic book movie. And I do, yeah, like you said, I want to see more of this universe because it's good. They made a good movie. Let's see more of it. Don't screw it up. I don't know if we're actually going to get it, though.
If you would have asked me a couple of years ago if this movie would have ever existed, I would have told you no way, probably along with a lot of other people. So I think there's certainly a possibility, and if people continue to be vocal and support this vision that Zack Snyder has and want to see more, that this could be a very real possibility if the studio is wise and listens to its fans and its directors.
Yeah, I don't. I think we've spent enough time on this one, man. Good movie. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Pay the $15 for a month of HBO Max and check it out, because it's worth it. You'd be spending $15 to see it in theaters anyway. So get your HBO Max, and then next week or 2 weeks from now, you can watch Godzilla versus Kong as well. All right, so that's going to do it for us this week on what I'm going to assume is going to be a longer than normal episode. We spent a lot of time on Zack Snyder's Justice League, but rightfully so, man. It's not just a new movie; it's a phenomenal new movie. So it deserved the discussion, and hopefully, the movies we picked earlier in the episode are movies that you haven't seen in a while. Maybe get you to go back and watch them. So, anything you want to add to that, Mitch?
Just thanks to everybody who's tuning in, watching, listening, who enjoyed our discussion about Zack Snyder's Justice League, because we both really enjoyed it, and it seems like there are a lot of people out there who are, and hopefully we kind of added something to that conversation.
Right on. See you next week.